Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Friday, September 15th. I'm Zoe Thomas for The Wall Street Journal. Chip design company ARM may not be a household name, but many people use its products. Its semiconductor designs live inside nearly all of the world's smartphones, as well as Apple computers, Amazon data centers, and a growing number of cars. So perhaps it's no wonder that investors were excited when ARM began selling shares on the public market yesterday. Its stock price, which listed at $51, closed 25% higher. So what does this all mean for ARM's future? Our semiconductors reporter Asa Fitch is here to tell us more about that. Asa, because ARM is not a company that many people will have heard of, can you just give us a bit of background on where it came from and what it does?
ARM is a British company that was founded in 1990, and it grew up with the cell phone industry. ARM was a key supplier to chips that went inside of those cell phones. So ARM, as you said, is not a household name, but it makes circuits. It designs different circuits that go inside the chips that in turn go inside your phones. So it's a very critical company, especially for the smartphone industry.
Is that what makes it so valuable?
That's part of what makes it valuable. It has a commanding share in smartphones. If you have a smartphone in your pocket or in front of you, you have an ARM circuit somewhere inside of it. It's in about 99% or maybe more than 99% of smartphones. So it's huge there. The company wants to and is expanding into other areas, automotive, cloud computing, networking, other things where it believes it has a competitive edge.
So tell us what made investors so excited about ARM and who some of the big investors in this IPO were.
So the excitement about ARM is, multidimensional. In one sense, people are very excited about AI, of course, and chips are the kind of hardware items that drive AI. The other thing that makes people excited really is just that it's a company that's been growing, that's ubiquitous, but not that well known. Another thing to consider here too is that there haven't been very many IPOs recently. The market there has been pretty dead. And so, ARM being the first big IPO and certainly the biggest of the year is just going to generate a lot of excitement.
You mentioned artificial intelligence. It feels like we cannot stop talking about AI on this show or anywhere else. Tell us how ARM fits into that space.
It's complicated. Right now in AI, the big player is a company called NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is making chips that go in big data centers and that can essentially help produce and deploy big artificial intelligence systems like you probably heard of OpenAI's ChatGPT and others like that. So the center of the artificial intelligence boom right now is NVIDIA. And those chips are not really ARM chips yet. NVIDIA is making some AI chips that are coming out fairly soon that incorporate an ARM-based CPU. But really the center of the AI universe in chips is really NVIDIA. ARM could benefit in major ways from AI. It's already involved in different ways in AI, maybe not at the core of AI right now. But the future, as these systems become more widely deployed, may involve ARM more and more. If AI becomes a central feature on smartphones, that certainly is going to help ARM. If AI becomes big in PCs, that could help ARM too.
The IPO is happening because Japanese investor SoftBank, which owns ARM, is selling about 10% of its stake. It's a big tech investor, but it's had some stumbles. So what does this IPO mean for SoftBank?
ARM has had sort of an up and down history during its ownership by SoftBank. SoftBank bought the company in 2016. Its revenues have gone up by about 65%, but that's not quite as good a performance since 2016 as many other leading chip companies. SoftBank is trying to raise money and trying to sell a story that ARM can, rocket forward in terms of revenue growth and profit growth in the future here.
Tell us a little bit more about where it does plan to go now that it's a public company.
So ARM wants to grow its revenue from circuits that it sells, they ultimately end up in smartphones. That's where it's dominant. So it wants to, of course, maintain that dominance, but get more revenue from those chips. In addition to that, it wants to expand. It wants to grow in data centers. The ARM market share these days is only about 10% in that area. So it's a pretty large area for growth for the company. ARM also wants to grow in the automotive space. Cars these days, especially electronic vehicles, use a lot of chips. They need a lot of chips. So there's a couple of areas, but there are many other areas where it also wants to grow its presence.
What does all of this tell us about the future of the semiconductors market?
Semiconductors are important in a couple of different respects. First of all, the world just consumes incredibly large amounts of data, and nobody thinks that those amounts will go down anytime soon. In fact, they're only going to go exponentially higher, probably. And so chips are essential for those things. The other factor here in the chip industry recently has been the geopolitical focus on chips. There's a lot of interest in the US, at least, in preventing countries like China from getting their hands on the most sophisticated chips and manufacturing the most sophisticated chips. And that's actually a challenge for ARM in a sense, because if the US were to restrict its access to the Chinese market, that would be a big problem. The company generates about 25% of its revenue from China. So there's a lot of attention focus on, making sure the chip industry thrives. And so there's kind of two sides to that coin, you could argue, that could either benefit or hurt ARM going ahead.
That was our semiconductors reporter, Asa Fitch. And that's it for Tech News Briefing. Today's show was produced by Julie Chang. I'm your host, Zoe Thomas. Our supervising producer is Melanie Roy. Our development producer is Aisha Al-Muslim. Our deputy editors are Scott Salloway and Chris Sinsley, and Philana Patterson is the Wall Street Journal's head of news audio. We'll be back with a new show on Monday. Thanks for listening.